Hello Class 4, welcome to today's English lesson, which today's session we're going to be continuing with our non-chronological report. So if you just have a quick look at the learning objectives. So it's for you to be able to write a non-chronological report. I'm looking for children who can explain who the Anglo-Saxons were and where they came from. You know, it's different between those homophones were and where. I'm also looking for children who can use their own research to add detail to keep the reader interested. Oh, if you notice there, children, proofreading. I've forgotten my full stop. Let's get that added in. I can include a range of suitable literary devices to engage with the reader. Notice that use there of the word suitable, so making sure that whichever techniques that you choose to use are suitable for the report. Now think carefully about what you've covered in the past few days in your GPS sessions, thinking carefully about expanded noun phrases, relative clauses, embedded clauses. You can even think about rhetorical questions, but let's not overuse them. A lot of you have maybe used a rhetorical question during your introduction, and you don't want to be overusing them and repeating them all the way through, because we'll end up then moving away from keeping the reader interested to making the reader bored and not wanting to read your piece of work. Okay, children, so let's have a think about what we've done in our English sessions the past couple of days. Well, sorry, not the past couple of days, the past couple of sessions. So, I know last week we created our introduction, and then we've also then looked at the gorilla introduction just to improve a dull one, so that we know that we're using all of our skills to engage effectively with the reader. So let's have a recap on what we wrote in the first session. So let's look at my first attempt even at a introduction. Amazing Anglo-Saxons introduction. The Anglo-Saxons were an amazing bunch of people that shaped the way in which we live in modern Britain. They were known as settlers, not invaders. They sailed across the North Sea over 1,600 years ago from what is now known as mainland Europe. This non-chronological report is going to explore who the Anglo-Saxons were, where they came from, and how they lived, and who were their rulers, kings and queens, not stationary. Now, as you can see there, I've just popped a note on there. After reading through the list of challenges, I realised I'd missed some of the items out, so I thought I would revisit my work and see if I could improve it. So that's what we did in the last session. We revisited our work to see if I could improve it to make it better, as the first attempt was a little bit dull. It wouldn't keep the reader engaged, and they would switch off or go and find a better book or a better piece of information to go and read. So, the amazing Anglo-Saxons introductions. Are you interested in history? Would you like to find out more about the Anglo-Saxons? If so, you are in the right place. The Anglo-Saxons were an amazing bunch of people that shaped the way in which we live in modern Britain. Luckily, for the people living in this time period, they were settlers and not invaders. Peacefully, they sailed across the North Sea over 1,600 years ago. This non-chronological report is going to explore who the Anglo-Saxons were, where they came from, and how they lived, and who were their rulers. And then in brackets for extra information, kings and queens, not stationary. So we're adding a bit of humour in there. Right, okay, children. So in today's lesson, we're going to be writing our section of the report that covers who the Anglo-Saxons were and where they came from. Sorry, where they come from, as it's written on there. Now, it does say in today's lesson, so that's our first objective for today's lesson, to explain who they were and where they came from. Now, our second second objective even, get myself jumbled up there, was to use our own research to add detail to keep the reader interested. Now, if you can remember, on our first full week of home learning, we had a look at completing this sheet here, didn't we? Well, sorry, ignore that date, because I think that date was if we did it in school. We looked at who the Anglo-Saxons were, where they came from, what they did for jobs, etc., and how Anglo-Saxon Britain was ruled. So that was our first bit of research into them. And I know that since then we've researched them we've carried out work, in our theme, in our English, we've even done a little bit of artwork on the Anglo-Saxons. So we're kind of starting to build up a bigger picture of them. Now, we can use any of the research that you have done to write in your non-chronological report. Any of your work that we've done all feeds into this report. Now, I'm going to look at this piece of theme work that we did the other day when we looked at who the Saxons were and where they came from. I thought this would fit perfectly into our report. So if you just click down on the third slide here, and it's giving me some information about the Anglo-Saxons. So the Anglo-Saxons came from Denmark, Germany, and the Netherlands. These fearsome warriors rode across the North Sea in wooden boats to England and forced the tribes in Britain to flee their homes. Within a few centuries, the land they had invaded was known as England after the Angles. Believe it or not, the Anglo-Saxons were warrior farmers. I'm just going to stop myself there, and I'm going to go back to my introductions, because I actually stated in my introduction that the Anglo-Saxons were an amazing bunch of people that shaped the way in which we live in modern Britain. Luckily for the people living in this time period, they were settlers and not invaders. Now, and I've also used this phrase here to say that peacefully, but if I double check against my research, now if they're warrior farmers, and if they and said that they were fearsome warriors, that actually make me think that they didn't row across the North Sea peacefully, and neither would my previous statement as saying that the people living in this time had nothing to worry about. So I do believe we need to update that and edit and improve our work as we go along. So let's have a think about this sentence. I think we need to change this completely. Luckily, the people lived in this time period were settlers and not invaders. I think actually what I'm going to do, I'm going to remove that sentence altogether. I think what have I done? What have I clicked there? So if I get rid of that bit. So all I need to do now is think of a different word, so a word to replace peacefully, so that it makes sense. So determinedly, because they were determined to get over to what we now call the UK. So determinedly. Determinedly, I spelled that wrong. It's because I'm trying to think about what I'm typing rather than how to spell it. So determinedly, they sailed across the North Sea over 1,600 years ago. So this called. Yep, right. Okay, so let's have a look at who the Anglo-Saxons were and where they came from. Now, you could be tempted to just copy and paste your information from your source, and there we go. Hey presto, we've got our report, but it won't flow properly and it won't be your work. You'll have just plagiarized somebody else's document. So I want you to, any research that you put into this, you need to put in your own words. So the first thing I want to write about is to say who they were. Who were the Anglo-Saxons? So let's have a quick glance at that. Research showed the Anglo-Saxons were warrior farmers. So we could start off just by typing that information in. Let's get rid of that. Change the font size so I can see what we're doing. Oh, I think my computer's frozen. Just there we are. Surprisingly, so there we go. We'll start with a adverbial. So surprisingly, the Anglo-Saxons, if you notice there, Anglo-Saxons, we're using capital letters because it is a proper noun. So surprisingly, the Anglo-Saxons were warrior, a hyphen to link related words. So the warrior were warrior, double check there, were warrior farmers. travelled to... And if you notice that, I keep checking back to my research so that I'm getting factual information in there. Who travelled from Denmark, Germany, and the Netherlands. Who travelled to what is now known as Britain, is now known as the United Kingdom, from Denmark, Germany, and the Netherlands. If anybody's watched the art video yet, you'll know that famous artist's piece of work is actually on display in the Netherlands. Surprisingly, Anglo-Saxon were warrior farmers who travelled to what is now known as the United Kingdom from Denmark, Germany, and the Netherlands. So to start off with there, you might think, oh, hey presto, there, we've got it. We've said who they were and where they came from. There we go. Absolutely fantastic, Mr. Madison. Fantastic. We've written one sentence. We've covered all bases. Let's submit that piece of work. No, unfortunately not. We need to add much more detail to our work. Now, we could start talking about here again that they sailed, so that they rowed across the North Sea in wooden boats to England, and forced tribesmen to flee their homes. However, we have already covered how they travelled here. So we have to be very careful about repeating ourselves and repeating the information that we've already got in there. So I'm just going to go back to my research, just have another look around. They began to... we could write a bit to say where they came from and then add some information to say what they looked like and maybe some of the skills, but we're not going to go into a lot of detail about that because we're going to have a separate section on what the Anglo-Saxons did in their day-to-day life. So I'm going to take this information, I'm just going to copy and paste it over into the main document just so I don't have to keep flitting between the two screens. So as stated above in the introduction, the Anglo-Saxons rowed across the North Sea to England using wooden boats, and upon arriving here, they forced the tribes to flee their homes. Now, some of you might be thinking, hey, Mr. Madison, you've just told us that we are not allowed to copy and paste somebody else's information, and you've literally just taken their piece of work and tried to pass it off as your own. But I'm going to use this now as my starting point and add more detail into this sentence. So let's have a quick recap. As stated above in the introduction, the Anglo-Saxons rowed across the North Sea to England using wooden boats, and upon arriving here, they forced the tribes to flee their homes. So let's add a bit of extra information. They forced the native tribes, which native tribes mean the people who lived here to begin with, to flee their homes so that they could farm and control the land. Okay, children, let's just have a quick look at the objectives. So I can use my own research to add detail to keep the reader interested. So I'm using my own research to keep the reader interested. Include a range of suitable, I spelled suitable wrong, suitable literary devices to engage with the reader. Now, expanded noun phrases, relative clauses, embedded clauses. Let's have a look. Have we got an expanded noun phrase in here? So I need to see on my work that I've got two adjectives before the noun. Using, we could have large wooden boats. So we've got two adjectives there describe the noun. And upon arriving here, they forced the native tribes to flee their homes so they could, let's have a look now. Where were it? Who? There we go. We've got a relative clause in our opening sentence. Right, okay, children. I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to pass it over to you to continue with your work. Your task today is to write a paragraph. Well, no, it's probably going to be more than a paragraph, but I'm going to limit you to a maximum of 3 paragraphs. So no more than 3 paragraphs, but you're probably going to be looking at writing a minimum of 2. So it's either 2 or 3 paragraphs to explain who the Anglo-Saxons were and where they came from. I'm looking for you to use detail from the research that you have carried out. So this is the research that I carried out, and I want you to add more detail than what I've got in mind. Think carefully about the GPS work that you have done over the past few days and all those techniques that you've been learning about that you could use in your work to improve it. Think about all of the different places that you have carried out research. Think about your passport activity that you did. Think about when you maybe went onto the BBC website. I've seen some amazing work of you children. Please use those skills in your work. From that BBC website, if you look down, the amount of information that you've got in there. But avoid, though, going into a different subject area, like growing up in an Anglo-Saxon village. Because at the moment, just to recap, you are covering who they were and where they came from. Now, with relation to where you should write your work, as you can see here, I've used Microsoft Word. You can use any suitable writing document. Now, I've had some feedback about Purple Mash saying that the resource sometimes doesn't save properly, or you save it and then you go back to it and it's not there anymore. So I know in the past I have told you to use Purple Mash for your non-chronological report, or I've even given it as an extra activity saying, oh, can you now type it up into Purple Mash? To be on the safe side, I'd like you to avoid doing that. If you've got access to something like Microsoft Word, or if you're using an Apple device, you might have Pages. Please type up your work into those, or failing that, if you use the notepad on Seesaw. Okay, children, I hope this session's been useful for you. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to get in touch. Thank you.